Welcome to a brand new season of Scintillations, the podcast that explores what's now and what's next in consumers, culture, and the business of branding. This season, we'll be studying Swiftonomics. Join us as we talk to marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs about what makes Taylor Swift the best brand on the market. Listen in as we unravel the secrets behind her ability to capture hearts, minds, and market share, exploring what makes her a powerhouse of success. If you're a bona fide Swiftie, if you just don't get the hype, or you want to know what you can learn and apply in your own business, this season is for you. Now let's get started with your host, Erica first.
Hi, Kendall. Thanks so much for being here with me today.
Hi, how's it going?
Good. Why don't we get started with you telling us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so my name is Kendall Cherry. I'm the founder and creative director over here at the Candid Collective, and I'm on a mission to create a world that's more candid and kind. For my clients, I'm basically a copywriter and a ghostwriter, and my claim to fame is really writing salesy content that sounds exactly like you wrote it yourself. And I don't really speak about this with my clients or anything, but the secret to my kind of trade and my craft is storytelling. So I'm very excited for this conversation.
What you do is perfectly suited to what we'll be talking about today, which is mythology. I work in branding and have worked with a lot of luxury brands and legacy brands, as they call them. And one of the things that is fundamental to these brands is their foundation story and how they were born and why they were born and what they were responding to in culture. And one of the things that I noticed a lot in Taylor Swift's universe is that there is a whole mythology of how she came to be, how her songs came to be, and they sort of lend to this prodigy, larger than life, a unique from the start kind of essence, brand essence, that is sort of the backstory, gives it a little push for what she does today. Now, for those who don't know, the story is that she loved poetry as a child, was picked on for being a sensitive girl in school, wasn't one of the cool kids, didn't sit at the cool kids table. And I think when she was 11 years old, she performed at school and she wanted to go to Nashville. She'd read that there was a music scene growing up in Nashville. And so she begged her parents to take her there on vacation, which her parents did. And that could be a whole other chapter, parental support in your career. Because if your 12-year-old comes to you and is like, take me to Nashville because I want to hand out demo tapes, I don't know how many parents are like, let's go. But she did. And the story is, or the myth is, that her parents took her to Nashville and she had a boatload of demo tapes and she was just walking up, 12-year-old, 13-year-old child, handing out demo tapes. And so this is one of the stories that I remember from her narrative. Now, if you look up on the internet, there's different versions of this and we can talk about that. And then two other stories that really stuck with me was that she was 16 or 17. She really had a huge crush on this guy. Her parents were like, hard no, you are not going out with that person. She was whiny and pouty, went up to her room, locked herself in her room. And this story comes from her mother, came down an hour later and had written Love Story. And then the other myth, these are all coming from the mom too. Taylor rarely tells these stories that come from the mom, that they were rehearsing for a tour and she came in, she was feeling very down. This was post Gyllenhaal situation. And she just grabbed a guitar and free flowing. And she went, and we can all see this scene in our mind. She's sitting there with her guitar, live writing poetry about her heartbreak. The musicians join and she went on for 10, 15 minutes. And this was the authoring of the All Too Well track. And then apparently the mother went to the guy who was at the mixer board and just said, please tell me you recorded that. And he handed her a CD. So these are the stories that are out there, right? These are anthemic songs that will last forever and ever and ever. And she just like wrote them on a whim. I can't even write a thank you email on a whim. And she's writing 10-minute classics. How do you see that this mythology is used as part of her brand?
Oh man, you're just totally speaking my language during all of that. The first thing I want to zoom in on is you used the word in Taylor Swift's universe, which I think is so profound and so important. When I think about building worlds, Taylor Swift is a world builder, and that really and truly is the key to building a brand in general. She does this in when I hear universe, the first thing that comes to mind for me, I'm an ex kind of comic book geek. I always think Marvel Cinematic Universe. You've got these godlike heroes, underdogs turned hero, which is very much the Taylor Swift narrative. So I love, first and foremost, the idea of Taylor Swift being this builder of worlds. And in any form of mythology, whether it's superheroes, whether it's religious stories that we pass down from generation to generation, you even talked about the story kind of shifts, and depending on who's telling it, if it's her mom or her. The other thing we know about fairy tales, which is another form of mythology, fairy tales, there's the Disney version of Cinderella, and then there's the very grotesque, the ugly stepsisters are getting their eyes plucked out version of Cinderella. And I think that's the power that Taylor Swift consciously or subconsciously knows about storytelling and intuitively knows that. I'm just thinking of how we're even having this conversation. The story gets passed down throughout different groups of people, different depending on who's telling the story. That for me is kind of the first thing that's needed for any form of mythology. Another thing I was reflecting on that I grew up wanting to be a writer. When I was a kid, my first grade teacher was writing in my report card, "You will write books one day." But I didn't necessarily get that artistic, creative nurturing to make that a career path. And so I was also deeply sensitive, empathic. So Taylor Swift for me, I zoom back, I'm 14 years old. I have my headphones on in my closet trying to make sense of the world, and I have all these deep emotions, and my best friend I have a crush on doesn't like me back, and all of these big feelings, to where Taylor Swift really became the soundtrack to my life. And there are many different seasons. Again, I've got 17 years of content of my life to have a song of Taylor Swift's, to not only have one era but multiple eras for certain songs. And I think that's the power of storytelling, is the ability for it to morph and change, and the mythology of it very similar to the kind of Cinderella piece, depending on the season that you're in. I credit so much of my development of my writing skills from studying Taylor Swift for so long. I did a lot of that kind of solo and on my own. And most of the people I've talked to are these deeply sensitive women who had similar singular experiences with her music. When you first heard that song, you felt deeply alone, and realizing that there's this universal truth and this universal theme when you're in the same room with all these people, feeling like, oh, I was never alone. And everyone has kind of their own kind of version. That's really what the song is. And so being in a group experience, everyone gets to have this kind of internal awakening through the storytelling in these songs, and through the kind of emotional awakening that then becomes this universal experience, which to me, at the end of the day, to me is the mythology of it. It's understanding this human experience on a universal level, and then making it accessible for each person, regardless of where they're starting from. But that becomes kind of the golden thread that, or I'll say invisible string, just to drop a Swiftie reference, but it becomes the invisible string that kind of ties us all together.
And yeah, I think what many interesting things that you said.
I know. You got me started.
One thing that I wrote down was the ability to make it your own and to see your own experience in the story itself. What are the elements that you think any good myth needs to have?
Yeah. I think if it's going to be a myth, it's got to be larger than life. It's got to be something that it feels, and I'll use the term godlike, not in a religious sense, but it is like Greek god. It is like its own universal world. And I even think we're recording this the week after the Super Bowl. Taylor Swift makes history with fourth album of the year of the Grammys. A week later, her boyfriend, who gave her his phone number on a friendship bracelet, wins the Super Bowl. And to me, it's that kind of larger than life, like there's some other force or something, like someone could not sit here and orchestrate that. That is some divine something that, again, to tie into that universal experience. And I think the power of the mythology is the ability to witness in those stories almost an expansion of what's possible for me. And I also loved what you were talking about with, I don't know, I picture, especially in the, I'll say the feminine kind of style of energy, this idea of starting and owning your narrative and owning your power and allowing that to be, for so many years that was stifled for women. And I think that this allows us to say, no, we can have a bigger path. And to me, I'll say modern mythology for brands, especially, there is this, it's part of why I think Barbie resonated so much with people. It's the belief that I'll say the feminine kind of energy has a space and it gets a story, which was not always the case for, I mean, thousands of years.
So let's talk about brands now. What does Taylor do that they can do also? Because going back to what we said, works about it is that there's something larger than life. There's an
Totally.
aspect of you that you can see in it, but creates a possibility of something much bigger. If I were divine, this might happen to me, but at the same time, I see a little bit of my own emotions in there. So there's lots
Yep.
of different aspects of connecting and distancing that create an interesting creative tension in there. So, what if you had to brief a company who we want to pretend to come up with a foundation myth? What would you tell them that they need to have?
Yeah. First things first, and this is storytelling 101, but you've got to make sure your brand is primed with the hero's journey. Taylor Swift is doing this on a very zoomed out macro level with her whole life story throughout everything, the entire the Scooter Braun drama, the different Leachella eras. There's all these pieces that create this perfectly formed hero journey on a kind of macro level. But what Taylor Swift also does really well is she creates a hero's journey for each individual album release. I think for brands, it's understanding that the hero's journey has to exist for the company at large, but then in different seasons for the company, it can also exist on kind of a micro level as well. But that to me is the first piece. And it's whether it's coming from the founder or the brand itself, depending on the type of company. So I would say that. And then I think don't underestimate the power of quote unquote eras or album seasons. So for me, I do this a lot. I notice in my business, even just as my own company and entity, we'll have seasons where we're a little bit more forward facing and we're telling a certain type of story. Then we kind of close the box on that one, and then we start a new, whether it's a quarter, maybe it's a year or a season of that business. But don't underestimate the power of creating an era, or again, Taylor Swift does this in album cycles. Dedicate, you don't have to change your whole brand color suite necessarily like she does, but create, again, the concept of building a world for this season, for this product. What is that world that supports the thing I'm selling? What does that look like and feel like? I do this in my business a lot with mood boards. So I have, of course, my brand colors probably not going to change that much. Our mission, Candid and Kind, that's not changing. But I will have a mood board for the season of, okay, this is kind of what I'm really leaning into. Towards the tail end of last year, I was really talking a lot about how to run a business or an online business in offline mode. So that was kind of my messaging thing. And then now I'm kind of in a different season. But I find even treating your messaging in that style of almost like an album or a file folder, it's going to do a couple of things. It keeps your audience kind of on its toes and it understands your values. But also, if you're the founder of that company or the face of that company, like it makes it feel fresh, because I can't imagine talking for 12 months out of the year about the same exact thing. You need kind of different flavors, and it's a creative process. For me, some of the best new versions of a season that I'm in or a new era comes from something I talked about on a podcast or something that I hear someone say, and then it becomes the whole focus for the next however long. So I would say those two things to me are kind of the easiest entry points and kind of a more of a tactile take on it. But I think she does that style of things very well, creating an era, a mood board, a vibe, if you're in Gen Z. But yeah, I think that's so important for your audience to receive, because it becomes what resonates with them, and the storytelling that can come from that is the different vignettes that you decide to share.
And what do you mean? So you talk about the hero's journey there, that everyone
Mhm.
needs to build a hero's journey and even individual ones. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. So there's this concept from Joseph Campbell. I believe the name of his book is The Man with a Thousand Faces. But basically, it's this idea that every story follows the same, I think it's 12 part arc. So it's basically this idea of this hero. He goes on a quest, he meets a mentor along the way, then something detrimental happens that takes him off of his path. And it's this course of coming back, finding whatever the thing he's on a journey for, whatever he's finding. Then there's another thing that sets him back, and then he comes home. There's a whole school of thought on it. If you're reading this or if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? There's a really great book called, I think it's Story Brand something something by Donald Miller. Does a really good job of breaking this down for brands. But the concept of the hero's journey says that if you zoom in on Star Wars follows the story brand arc to a T. I just sent a client of mine he's a single dad. So I found a video on YouTube. You can type in hero's journey example and it will give you lots of examples from other creators. This single dad, I'm trying to teach him about hero's journey, had a gut feeling that he watches a lot of Moana. So I found a Moana video and he was like, Kendall, I could be Moana at this point. I've watched it so much. So there are examples of the stories like Star Wars, Lilo and Stitch, all of these very, very popular stories basically boil down to the same 12 part story framework. So I would say the story brand book is a little more tactical if you're looking for like actual examples. But if you go on YouTube hero's journey and your favorite movie, and some creator out there has probably built a walkthrough of 15 minutes breaking down scene by scene how it follows that framework.
And what are some other brands whose foundational myths you think are great?
Oh, I freaking love Sarah Blakely and Spanx, that red backpack. Oh my gosh, it's so good. So for Sarah Blakely, she founder of Spanx. She does a really great story. I'm waiting for that memoir to come out if she ever does one. I don't know why she hasn't yet, but the myth goes that I forget, she wanted to wear a pair of pants or something. And my brain is like, whoa, we're doing the thing again where I'm telling the story of the story. Like, what? But this is literally truly the power of storytelling. So the myth goes she couldn't wear a pair of pants or something. They weren't fitting. So she needed some kind of shapewear. So she just designed them herself. And she would go door to door trying, again, the shapewear that every woman has worn at this part. Celebrities wear this on the red carpet, billion-dollar business. And the men, her investors, are, no, we're not gonna invest. We don't really think these are working. So Sarah in her little red backpack is going door to door trying to sell to these women who are staying at home while their husbands are at work. And then the thing that really got her first round of funding that I think is just so fun, she's so smart. She knew that the men in the room were going to give her the same answer of, oh, well, we don't really see the value of this. So before her big pitch day, Sarah Blakely mails the wives of these investors, she mails them a pair of Spanx and tells the men, just ask your wife if you think this is valuable or not. And of course, they're like, what is this? We need 3 pair. This is incredible. And it's I think that is a great brand that has really held on to the origin story. And I even think back to when the pandemic hit, Sarah is so committed to female founders and making sure more female founders get funding, that when the pandemic hit, they had, I think it's called the Red Backpack Fund, but she gave away, I don't remember the number, but a significant amount of early stage funding for product-based businesses to fund their dream, for who were kind of in the same boat when the pandemic first started and all of that happened. So that's just one brand that I think does it so well. I'll say like Spanx, but also just like Sarah Blakely, the founder, does so well. And her content online is always really inspiring.
Yeah, I'm just writing down, thinking across the brands that I know what the common elements are. And there's
Yeah.
a working to solve something, either get your poetry heard or help women do this. One of my favorite foundational myths is Moët Chandon, which was they were trying to bottle this white wine, but it kept over fermenting. I guess they had put too much sugar in it or something. And so it kept bubbling. And the one of the kings of course I'm doing a terrible paraphrasing of it, but
Okay, this is mythology. This nobody really remembers, so it becomes larger than life. This is
right.
it.
And there's 15 different versions of it, but there was a king that was coming to visit this monastery, and he was going to have this wine, but it kept being so bubbly. And so instead of saying, we apologize, our white wine is a hot mess, they were like, no, we've invented this new product, do you like it? And that was
Yeah.
right? It started a whole billions of dollar, trillion-dollar industry right there from a divine mistake, right?
Yeah.
And a pinch of ingenuity. So it's always someone there being a little bit clever, willing to do the trying to solve for X, not being struggling to solve for X, has some sort of strike of genius and voila. So like you said,
Totally.
there's something larger than life, but there's also something that could have been me also. I could have done that.
Mhm.
I've got or gives you the idea that it could in the future potentially be you, right? Like maybe you
Yeah.
come up with the product and go door to door and sell things. It's tangible and huge at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's I mean, when I think about most entrepreneurs and even like products and stuff, they usually at this point sometimes they'll be like, "Well, it's already been done before, so why should I do it?" But it's the constant iteration and innovation that allows us to keep moving. I mean, look at the wheel. That thing's been around for thousands and thousands of years, and who knows? There, it just is constantly iterating and innovating. And I think it's such a truth, even hearing us kind of reweave a story that technically has already been threaded. This idea that it is morphable and it all depends on how you decide to show up. And I think it's great advice in business and in life. You can decide, okay, I got the chips stacked against me, but everyone loves an underdog. Everyone loves an underdog. And it is a strike of genius, but it's the belief. I think there becomes a point when you have to believe like, no, and we're talking a little bit around self-worth here, but am I worthy? Am I deserving of the thing that I want? I find for me as a business owner, a lot of time that strike of genius strikes literally the moment I decide it is possible and that I can do it. Whether it's like I'm having writer's block on a project, or I'm trying to dip into new markets or a different level of client caliber or whatever. It's the hero's journey all over again, right? It's you're going to get met with this obstacle that completely throws you for a loop. What are you going to do? It doesn't always mean the story is a happy ending, but you're going to get hit with this major roadblock, and you as the hero decide, will I step up and face it, or will I shrink down and return to my normal life? Or ordinary day is the first stage in the hero's journey. Hero's journey is decide, no, I am worthy and deserving of the next stage of whatever the challenge takes. If it's going to be an uphill battle, I know I'm worthy enough to take the first step. And then things in the hero's journey, the hero always meets a mentor figure. They end up taking the first step. They're like, okay, I see the chips. I know what I'm up against. I'm going to try and do it alone. Fun fact, they can't. They need community, but they always meet a mentor and they're shown the path as they get started. But the first step in kind of that self-belief is always and for the hero, and the hero's journey as the framework, but also as the human, having a human experience, that's always the key to those kinds of moments.
And I think the difference between a foundation story and a myth is that struggle is the exception, is the anomaly, because the story of, oh, we had this product, we got funded, and we started making it is like, no one is going to repeat
Boring.
that story ever
No
again.
one cares.
There needs to be some tension, right? Even the most successful thing, it's like, oh, I had this idea that maybe this could be interesting and I sold it. They gave me funding and now we're producing it. It's like,
Totally.
congratulations, but I'm never going to tell that story. So there has to be some tension, some anomaly, some struggle in it that creates that opportunity for
Totally.
the Deus ex machina moment for a thing.
Yeah, yeah.
And
What I can tell you, I was going to say, what I can tell you as somebody, I mean, I've written pitch decks before. I've written about stories on web pages. I've done this kind of brand positioning piece. Always, 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 always. And if you're a business owner, please incorporate this today. Most people get the like about or the origin story wrong because you think it's kind of like you said, well, I had this idea, I got funded, and now it's on the market. It's like, no, 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 no. You don't just sit there and devote your life to startup life, which is very hard and very shitty for many years until maybe it works. Nobody in their right mind actually does that. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. There's so much to the reason, whether it's something that directly happened to you or a product that you needed, so you're going to build it, or someone close to you, whatever the origin story is. When you're writing an about page, if you're telling a pitch deck story, the thing is remembering that your story is paralleling every time. It is every time your ideal customer or your ideal client. So when you tell your story and it mirrors that person, that is the thing that resonates with them. That is the power of storytelling, and that's how it sells. And the thing for me, I know when I've had many dark seasons in business, and I know people all the time. That's just the nature of entrepreneurship. The number one thing I tell myself when I'm like, okay, I need a miracle, I need a mindset glow up, I need some kind of words of wisdom. The thing that I always tell myself if I'm kind of going through it is I'm living a story in my future pitch deck. I'm living a story in my future memoir. I am living a story in my future keynote or XYZ. I'm living a story. I'm going to meet some stranger on the street, and this story is going to change their life. But that knowing and that knowledge is truly, whether it's on your about page or it's something in a pitch deck, or you're on Shark Tank in front of Mark Cuban or whatever, however you're going to get that message out. So much of that origin story and the struggle is the thing that connects the most with your ideal clients and customers. And if you're just thinking, I thought about it, I funded it, and I built it, boring. You're not going to be around. You're not going to be a brand that lasts a lifetime and builds a legacy. It's just not a thing.
Right. Well, at least you're certainly not going to have any space in conversation. I don't know the foundation story of Q-tips, but I don't think it's interesting.
Sexy. I bet some marketer made it so juicy. I bet it's so juicy. Who in their right mind was like, let's throw cotton on its end of a stick and stick it in my ears? There's some quippy little Q-tip story there for sure.
I could be wrong. We should put together a book of all the the
best origin stories. That's actually nobody's steal our idea. It's currently copyrighted. We're building it.
I said it.
We have the IP.
All right. Last question, which is the hardest one. Favorite Taylor Swift song?
Oh God. Okay. I have many. I am a mirror ball girly through and through and through and through. Reason I love mirror ball, I mean, what I do for a living is basically the constant assessment. I'm a writer. My feelings and thoughts, I write for clients. I write sales and marketing content on my behalf, but I'm actually this year working on a manuscript, and it's my entrepreneurial hero's journey, just to bring it real full circle. And for me, Mirror Ball is my favorite Taylor Swift song because it perfectly captures the belief that you have to be on center stage and you create like humor, these experiences for people to reflect back on themselves with, while also feeling uncomfortable with like, I don't know that I want the whole world to feel that, but also recognizing like you have a very important purpose, being a ball of mirrors circling around on the center of a stage. So that's my Taylor Swift song, Mirror Ball.
Rather poetic interpretation. Most people are just like,
of course.
I love this because I can dance to it.
Yeah, we are never ever getting back together. No, you're gonna get a poetic answer, of course, but yeah, that one's mine for sure.
Never ask a writer about writing.
I know, I would literally be here all day.
All right, Kendall, well, thank you so much for your time today. This is great.
Amazing. Thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Scintillations. If you've enjoyed listening to us, please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps us share our learnings with more curious and interested people like yourself. See you next time.